afternoon, good evening to everyone, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you for participating in our webinar today, SiriusDecisions Series, How to Generate Opportunities, Not Just Demand. I'm Gary Gerber. I'm Head of Product Marketing for Conversica. We provide AI software to help marketing and sales teams market and sell more effectively. We'll get into that in a little bit. More importantly, I want to introduce our esteemed guest, Terry Flaherty with SiriusDecisions. Terry is a Senior Research Director at Sirius in the Demand Creation Strategy Service, and for the last 5 years, he has been focused on the demand management process, which is why you'll want to hear what he has to say. You also want to hear what he's written, because he's also one of the co-authors of the new demand unit waterfall. It was announced last year, and we'll be talking about that today. So that's the main thing. Welcome, Terry.
Thanks, Gary. Glad to be here.
Awesome. All right. First, folks, we're going to make you do some of the work. We're going to have a poll question, so please get your poll question fingers ready. Please grade your organization's overall ability to fully leverage your leads. So you're doing all this work, spending all these resources to get sales leads into your company. How well is your company doing leveraging them? You're really maximizing them. B, you're doing pretty well. C, not good, not bad. D, you really know you need to do better. F, we are really, really just weak on this. For everyone, just a few seconds. People are voting quickly. We appreciate that.
Yeah, some interesting results, Gary. What do you think?
Yeah, I guess what we might have expected, right? People in the middle, they just kind of balanced. Although a few more people saying that they think they're actually pretty good than I would have expected. So maybe we've got a good audience.
Yeah, smart audience. That's great.
Awesome. All right, I think we've got a pretty solid. Terry, what do you think? Why don't you take us forward with what you saw for the poll?
Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. And one of the key things we saw in the poll was people would like to get better, right? And so what we're going to do today is talk about how to improve the demand management process. And also talk about this shift. I mean, the title of the presentation is moving from just thinking about individual leads to looking at opportunities. And so we'll focus on how we improve that. No matter whether we're passing leads or we're passing opportunities, however we're thinking, I'd like to think of the demand management process as a relay race, right? And we have different runners. We have marketing, we have a teleservices team, we have a sales organization, and they're all running. And what's interesting is there's a lot of focus on improving sort of the individual legs of the race, right? And so let's make marketing have really great programs and be really good at driving relevant messaging, or let's have tele do all these great things. But one of the things we see is that the handoff points are often a major break point. And so like in a relay race, I can have a really fast runner, but if we drop the baton, we don't win the race. And the same type of thing occurs in the demand management process. We obviously want each of our runners, each of our functions to be as good as we possibly can, but we also have to look at that handoff and make sure that we don't drop the baton and we have a seamless handoff. And so we're going to take a look at that today. We're going to focus in the context of how it starts to evolve a little bit when we start thinking about kind of this shared focus on opportunities as opposed to thinking about just individual leads. But that's the context we're going to look at is, what's the handoff processes look like in this new view of the waterfall, and why is that seamless handoff important? So just to give you a quick overview of what we're going to talk about today, what we see is many organizations, marketing is still thinking about leads, right? So they'll generate lots of MQLs or TQLs or whatever you call them, right, and send them over to the sales organization. The sales organization is focused on opportunities, right, and they're thinking naturally about the buying groups associated with opportunities. And so as you'll see, that different perspective, that different objective or focus on outcome really can cause misalignment. And so, what we believe is that a shift to what we call demand units, which is really early stage opportunities, that's the answer to start driving alignment between sales and marketing. But to do that, it's going to require, as you'll see, a change in culture, a change in process, and a change in technology. And what we need to do is focus on the handoffs within these entities within this demand unit that's moving through the waterfall to make sure we get the efficiency. And so what you're going to walk away from today, our promise to you, is you're going to learn about why we want to start thinking about opportunities and demand units as opposed to leads. We're going to take a look at some of the challenges you face as you make this transformation, and we're really going to focus, and Gary's going to give great examples of how to optimize the handoffs between marketing and tele and sales, leveraging their technology and their client base. Okay, so why should we care about starting to think about a shift in focus away from individual leads and kind of aligning with sales and opportunities? And this is a really powerful view of the problem, right? Which basically says, as we think about the current demand management process today, what I see, I focus a lot, as Gary mentioned, on the demand waterfall, and what I see is, just a very rough approximation. The conversion rate of the waterfall is about 1%. Right, so I put 100 inquiries into the top of the waterfall. I get one deal at the back end. But if I take a more pragmatic view, what we're really doing is running a process that's a cross-functional process that has a 99% failure rate. And what's driving that is not necessarily it's a broken process. And in many cases, it might be. But it's the way we're thinking about defining and measuring this process that's a big influence in why we have conversion rates that aren't necessarily what we're aiming for. And so what we're going to look at is how do we start to redefine the process from a thought perspective and from a measurement perspective. And so if we drill down a little bit and look at the typical demand management process that we see today, as I mentioned earlier, marketing's thinking about individual leads, right? So they're what we call them AQLs or MQLs or TQLs, right? We're generating leads that meet a qualification threshold, and then we send them over to a receiving function like sales. Sales is thinking about opportunities, right? They know that for us to sell, into an organization, my talent management solution, it requires these 6 people in the buying group. And for me to sell that, I have to get thumbs up from everybody that's involved in that buying decision process. And so we're at the very beginning thinking about different outcomes, different objectives. And organizations that are winning this game are organizations that say, okay, let's put in a repeatable, scalable, optimized way to tie all this together, right? And to get shared outcomes, shared focus, where both marketing and tele and sales are all aimed at the same outcome of producing opportunities and revenue, as opposed to marketing saying, hey, look, we just generated 1,000 TQLs or MQLs, and sales going, yeah, we really don't understand what's going on from an opportunity perspective. Right. One of the contributing factors to this is if we think about the way the current process works, marketing is focused on these individual things. It's sales that has the knowledge and has the responsibility to say, I'm going to take these individual leads, supplement them with additional leads that I find through my discovery, and logically connect them together into an opportunity in a buying group. And what's interesting, if we think about kind of systemization and where all this knowledge is stored today, most of the time where the insight around these buying groups and the relationship between the leads that we're sending and the leads that sales are discovering, where that should exist, right, is in Salesforce automation, right? In a perfect world, we'd be able to go and look at opportunities and see, here's the 6 or 7 contacts, and here's where we are in our relationship with those 6 and 7 contacts and support this buying decision process. In reality today, the truth is, in a lot of cases, that knowledge around the insight of all the people coming together in the buying group and where we are with that relationship across the group is really in salespeople's heads, right? And so we announced in May a new waterfall, right? The demand unit waterfall. And one of the goals of this new waterfall is to drive a new process that's going to help reduce this problem, right? And we're going to show how we can systematically, leveraging a new waterfall, align sales, marketing, and tele into thinking about opportunities and streamline and optimize these processes so that we break down a few of these barriers. Because one of the challenges we see across our client base today is when we are focused on these different outcomes and that implicit knowledge about the different buying groups is not systematized, marketing has a challenge, right? Because while marketing and marketers may be thinking about like personas and the role of personas in the buying decision process, very often that's at the corporate level, but not necessarily at the solution level, because they may not know how many people are actually involved in that buying decision process. So, giving marketing the insight to say, here's all the people involved in the buying decision process helps drive better messaging. And it also helps them assess where they are in the shared responsibility to say, let's go drive demand for this potential opportunity. As you'll see, there's process challenges too that are very common where sales may not benefit from the insight that's possible too, right? So we see a lot of times where sales will get that first lead, right? And they'll qualify that first lead, create an opportunity, but then there's process problems where they may not get insight into any other leads that engage because, quote unquote, we're not going to invest our SDR resources because we're working this lead already or working this opportunity already. And there's some inherent problems. We're going to talk about something called the second lead syndrome in a little bit. But, so the net challenge is, sales has the need to identify and engage with multiple people. Those multiple people may be actually engaging with marketing, but we have some process limitations and problems that prevent sales from having that insight, both for the current opportunities that they're working and also, as you'll see, even new opportunities within an existing account. Okay, so our answer, right, was this new concept we came out with in May of the demand unit waterfall and this thing called the demand unit. And we're going to talk a lot about the demand unit in a second, but by aligning on the demand unit, what we're really doing is aligning to the target buyer, the needs and the solutions from both our marketing, teleservices, and sales organization. And in this new waterfall, we've defined very clearly key new process stages and definition of what the handoff points look like within these process stages. And we'll also talk about today then service level agreements and the roles and responsibilities of the handoff from marketing to tele and then from tele to sales and how we measure and how we provide governance on this. But the cornerstone of this thing is the demand unit. And one of the things that we've seen as organizations start to evolve from a waterfall and a demand management process that's focused on individual leads into an approach that's thinking about buying groups and opportunities and demand units, is there's three major sort of obstacles or challenges that need to be addressed as part of this evolution. And the first is cultural, right? And, where we see a lot of engagement, there's a lot of organizations that are kind of waking up going, hey, all this knowledge about a buying group and the engagement of the buying group, that's really an important asset at the corporate level. And so, just the alignment that says we want marketing, intel, and sales all focused on informing and that buying group and engaging across the buying group at all stages of the process is a major cultural shift that we see, right? It's very often no longer acceptable to say, okay, all that insight around how these five people connect together, that needs to be available way earlier than where it might be in the opportunity stage, that exists today in the sales process. And so as a result, once you make the cultural shift to say, yeah, we want to take this knowledge and make it available to everybody, that has major impact on process. And we're going to look at some of the changes in process that occurs. And obviously we have changes in technology and systems to start reflecting this concept of a demand unit. So what I want to do, I've talked a lot about demand unit. Let's drill down for a few minutes and kind of look at, like I said, we announced this new construct we call the demand unit waterfall. It's based off of this logical entity we call a demand unit, right? And the demand unit really is answering three questions, right? Who's the buyer? Right. And what we now see is the buyer is really a group of people, a buying group working together as opposed to just that unique, single individual. We want to align that demand unit, that buying group to a business need, right? So my talent management, my HR department has a business need to improve the accuracy and efficiency of their hiring process, and a group of people in HR are going to come together and form a group to go solve that problem. And they may also, tap some people from IT and maybe some line of business people, but there's a team that's forming together to solve the problem of improving the efficiency and accuracy of the hiring process. And if we have a talent management solution that meets the scale that's needed, maybe it's an enterprise level global talent management solution, then we can say, okay, we've got a viable solution. And when we have a buyer with a business need that our solution can address, that's really the building blocks of demand. We need all three of those things to exist. And when they do exist, that's a point in a market or a point in an account where I can invest marketing, intel, and sales resource to try to identify and wake up and engage and qualify that entity. So the big major shift that we announced in May was this demand unit. And the demand unit's what's going to move through the demand management process and through the waterfall, right? And to do that, right, we want to obviously be able to track the progression of this demand unit over time, over the progression of these different stages. And so as you'll see, right, we now have this new waterfall with some new stages and some modified stages to think about the group. But a key piece of this is we want to make this construct, this demand unit, available to marketing, intel, and sales as a shared objective, right? To be able to identify, engage, and qualify these things all the way through the process, from the very beginning of planning all the way down to the closed deal. And so we talked about demand units. Another key concept we had, which is really powerful, especially for organizations focused on account-based marketing, is this construct of a demand map. And this basically says, within accounts, it's very likely, especially if I have, a portfolio of several different solutions, or maybe, tens or 20 or hundreds of solutions, and I'm targeting organizations that have multiple buying groups, it's very likely that that organization will have multiple demand units or multiple potential opportunities that exist in that organization. And so the second construct we announced in May is this thing we call a demand map. And a demand map basically says, let's look across the buying groups in an account or in a market. Let's look at the business needs. Let's map our solutions to those intersection points. And in this example, it says, we have the opportunity for 9 potential opportunities in this account. Right. And with that, this is a great alignment strategy between marketing, intel, and sales on, where do we aim and what's the potential that we define? Where are the buying decision points within the account? And then the demand waterfall is a construct we use to define the progression of these potential opportunities through different stages. So just real quickly, target demand basically says, from a profile fit perspective, we think these organizations, there's 1,000 organizations that we believe might be the right target for our enterprise talent management solutions based on industry and size. Active demand says, hey, we're seeing signals that they're actually in market looking for solutions, maybe coming to our website, maybe going and getting other website, and we get insight from third-party intent vendors, but we know they're in market, and we can start to drive marketing programs like ad targeting or outbound teller or whatever the case might be to try to wake those up or connect directly with that. And when we do, that's what we call engaged demand. So now I've got a direct connection with one or more people in that buying group. I start looking at the depth and breadth of the engagement, and I may say, we want 2 or 3 people engaged before we say it's ready to go to sales or ready to go to tele. And so just like we used to score individual leads, we now score the group. And when we reach a threshold, that's prioritized demand. Qualified demand is when we've met the criteria that says, up here we've made a lot of assumptions. Qualified demand says, we verified these assumptions. So we know there's a need, we know that there's a buying group that exists, we've seen maybe that there's budget that exists, and there's a initiative that's going to occur in 6 months. So that's qualified demand. Pipeline is when we can put a deal size and a close date on it, and then close is when we won. So just as a context, that's the new waterfall that we introduced in May. And so these 3 building blocks are core to a new view of the demand management process that starts to focus on opportunities as opposed to just individual leads. Now, one of the key questions we get a lot is, within that waterfall, you may have noticed there wasn't, marketing qualified lead and tele-generated lead. What we've done is shifted the focus to say every potential opportunity is going to go through these different stages. We still need to define roles and responsibilities from a go-to-market strategy on who's going to do what. And so this is a pretty common flow. Right. And this flow says, marketing is going to wake up the demand unit. We're going to define, here's the number of potential opportunities that exist in this market segment. And we actually recommend marketing and sales work closely together on that because, we want to agree on where we're aiming. So marketing and sales says, here's the market segment, and we think there's 1,000 accounts in these market segments that we can aim our enterprise talent management solution at. Then in this example, marketing is then looking for signals to say they're in market, they're driving marketing programs to drive engagement, and to get many people or multiple people engaged, doing the right people doing the right thing to reach prioritized demand. And here's a handoff then to tele. Right. And tele is going to do qualification, right, where they're looking for specific qualification criteria. And when they get there, they're going to hand it off to sales. Sales is going to then do deeper qualification and close. And so this is a pretty common, probably the most common demand process flow we see, but there's other flows, right? We could have, handoff from marketing to sales, or maybe tele is going to drive outbound very early in the process. But again, this is a commonplace. But what I want to focus on are these 2 SL areas and really understanding these are where the handoffs occur. And this is where we see a lot of breakpoints, both in kind of the lead-centric waterfall, but also in the demand unit, opportunity-centric waterfall. So let's take a look at what's going on in these handoffs. One of the big things we've seen, in these handoffs that's been very significant is a shift in the entity of what we're handing off, what we actually deliver both to sales, but also now even to tele, right? And so, in the past we saw a lot where sales would qualify or tele would receive an AQL, and it meets certain criteria, but the expectation would be the salesperson or the teleperson would be the one that would make the outreach to try to connect with that prospect. And what we've seen that's much more effective is a delivery mechanism of appointments. And so whether it's an appointment being set for the teleperson or the teleperson setting an appointment for the end salesperson, this is a much better handoff mechanism because it implies a higher level of qualification, right? It's the prospect agreeing to take an appointment and spend time learning more about your solution. We see much higher acceptance rates and just better conversion through the process. And so, we believe one of the key transformational changes in this process is more focuses on delivering appointments as the handoff mechanism as opposed to sending over just individual leads. And so Gary's going to talk a lot about how he uses, his technology enables his clients to do exactly what he just talked about, setting appointments in a lot of different contexts. Okay, so what I want to do is shift gears a little bit now. Let's drill down into the SLAs. And what I want to talk about is what we see as, when I do these handoffs, right, what I see as the major breakpoints moving from marketing to tele or from tele to sales and how to think about fixing them. And I'm going to categorize these as sort of service level handoff issues and then strategy or more strategic handoff issues. And so when we think about service level handoff issues, there's three that are really common. Right. And the first one is, it's amazing the number of leads that get generated that are sent to tele or sent to sales that are never even touched. They fall into the black hole, right? And they just sit there and there's no engagement. Or the other service level problem that we see very frequently is they may be touched, but it may take 3 days or 5 days or an extended amount of time for that, that salesperson or the teleperson actually try to attempt to engage with that person. And then the last is low effort. So when they do actually try to connect, they make 2 or 1 or 3 touch attempts. But what we've seen is, and as you'll see later, right, to really drive conversion and make sure the efficiency in this handoff process is as high as it can be, number one, we can't have anything falling in the black hole. But timeliness and persistence and effort are really critical. And so the way you start to improve kind of these SLA-based focus areas, issues, is agreement on timeliness and engagement within the SLAs. Right? We're going to have that first touch attempt within 15 minutes, and we're going to make X number of touch attempts over the course of a time period to try to drive engagement. And we're also going to make sure that we have a really good understanding. Another reason why things fall through the crack is because of the perception that the leads aren't good, right? So we want to make sure that we have a very good definition across these different functions on what is a qualified lead, what is a qualified opportunity. We want to put plays in place then that give guidance to say, here's the touch attempts and the cadence and the frequency that we'd like to see around this qualification attempt and have SLA governance to make sure that we're actually driving it. Right. So all of these are around what I would consider sort of process issues. There's another category of handoff challenges that occur, and part of that is around the focus, right? And so when marketing is sending individual leads, but sales is thinking in buying groups and opportunities, and tele is kind of stuck in the middle, that combination of different objectives really does introduce what I would consider strategic focus issues that break the process. And one of the major things that we're seeing, and this is becoming even more dominant when we look at companies that are leveraging ABM strategies and trying to drive more focus within an account, is what I call a second lead syndrome. And so let me give you an example of what a second lead syndrome looks like. Right. And so this is really common. This happens all the time. I have this conversation very frequently where marketing and sales will come together and say, we want to start doing ABM, right? We want to focus on a specific set of accounts. So, marketing might say, hey, let's do this. We know this is a very effective go-to-market strategy. And sales is like, awesome. Let's go after 500 accounts. Marketing builds programs and deploys them. They generate lots of AQLs. But sales is like, hey, wait a second. What happened to my leads? right? And marketing will come back and say, well, wait a second, we're actually doing exactly what we planned. We just generated 10 AQLs over the course of 2 weeks or whatever within an account that we agreed that we were going to target. This is a really good thing. And sales is like, wait a second, we're not seeing that from a lead volume perspective because of, as you'll see, strategic process issues. And so organizations that suffer from the second lead syndrome, I'm going to show you an example. This 10 account was from a real client a couple of weeks ago. And if we think about what happened to the 10 AQLs, here's the challenge that occurred, right? Is that one of those AQLs made it through to kind of sales accepted, sales qualified lead and opportunity. And then from a process perspective, 9 of them actually got disqualified because they were considered duplicate leads. Because, the current process was that the SDR team, once that opportunity was created, no more leads would be sent to sales on that opportunity and be processed by the SDR because it was quote unquote a duplicate lead. And so we see, this is a major challenge in a process, especially as I said, when marketing is starting to try to focus more and more on account penetration and coverage and buy route penetration. So the challenge, and Gary's going to talk about this, is what we should be doing is driving engagement across all of these 10 AQLs, right? And the insight we can gain from these 10 AQLs is really valuable. It could be that 3 of these AQLs actually are working together in a buying group, and getting that insight early in the process is really important. What it also could find, and this was actually true with the client I was working, is those 10 AQLs actually represented 4 distinct different opportunities, different buying groups or different solutions, but the process that was in place was breaking that, right? And so to fix that, as I said, we need to, number one, change our focus and say we can't have this shutdown of we don't want to talk to anybody else because it's quote unquote a duplicate lead, but now we start introducing some scalability challenges. And so I'm going to turn it over to Gary in a few minutes to talk about, his thoughts on how we start to address some of the scalability issues that occur when we say, okay, we really want to touch these 10 AQLs and we don't want to be shutting down, kind of our engagement efforts with them because we happen to have one opportunity that was started based off the insight we've seen so far. So related to that, right, was that even existing customers, right, the same person, so Fred bought our talent management solution. That's great, right? But Fred was the VP of HR that might also be interested in our core benefit and payroll. And another issue we see is that if Fred comes back and downloads a white paper on talent, on core benefit, core payroll and benefit, very, very likely he's not going to be considered a true lead either, because again, the issue of we're already working that account and the salespeople probably know about it, but chances are they don't, right? And so this is another dimension where we start introducing the need of driving engagement with Fred to make sure we understand that he really is representing a new opportunity, not just for that talent management solution that he already bought, but for the core benefit, payroll and benefit systems that we have, right? So I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to turn it to Gary in a minute, but my takeaways on, as we think about the key things that start to change within this demand management process, and especially how it looks at these human touch points, right? What we see are the things that are most effective to drive the best results is, kind of the combination of timeliness and cadence. Right, so you have to touch frequently. You have to touch, on a volume that basically says, let's not give up too quickly, right? We want to make sure we have enough persistence to really make sure we have the opportunity to connect with that person. And when we do that, we have to have the right tone. And so, we have human-based, sales development reps that focus a lot on driving the right engagement, but there's alternatives on how we establish tone, both from an email nurture perspective, and as you'll see, with maybe AI-driven conversations. Very closely related to that is relevance of message. We want to make sure that when we're trying to drive these touch points, that we're communicating effectively around the business needs, around the value that we're going to deliver to the client, right? We just talked about earlier that delivery mechanisms are also really critical, and appointments are proving to be a much better delivery mechanism from a whole waterfall perspective than handing over leads. It solves, A, it's an indication of a higher quality lead or opportunity, and B, it starts to eliminate these handoff breakpoints that we see in the process. And kind of my last sort of umbrella is alignment, right? And when I think about alignment, it's really alignment around the shared objective of thinking about an evolution from individual buyers to buying groups and opportunities, and having sales, marketing, and the teleorganization all aimed at the same outcome, but all with clearer understanding of their roles and responsibilities within that process. So I'm going to turn it over. I think I've talked enough. And guys are probably tired of hearing from me. So I'm going to turn it over to Gary. And Gary's going to give you some insight about how he addresses, and Conversica addresses some of these issues. We're talking about increasing the scale, but how do we handle that in an effective manner at the scale we're just talking about? So Gary, all yours.
Great. Thanks so much, Terry. And believe me, I could never get tired of listening to you talk about this stuff. It's fascinating, and it's important information for a modern marketer. If anyone who doesn't want to just keep doing things the way they've been doing them needs to understand the new landscape. So thank you.
Absolutely.
So Oh yeah, for sure. So it's interesting if we look at or we think about the waterfall that Terry's been talking about. It kind of breaks into a couple of different halves, right? There's the first half that's really about determining where are the right leads to reach, right? And how are we going to access them, and targeting the demand and the active demand and the engaged demand, and prioritizing that demand. And then the second half of the waterfall is more than what do we do with those leads, right? And qualifying the demand and building it into pipeline and closing it. And realistically, if you think about it, that second half is really well applied to people. People are really good at qualifying and building pipeline and closing deals. And the first half is maybe not the best use of people, and we'll talk in just a minute about what that means. And particularly in light of the challenges that Terry's talking about, where you're talking about the black holes and slow response and low effort, people's ability to actually engage leads. We'll look at that in a minute. And then, of course, the second lead syndrome, which is a massive scaling challenge. But before we start diving into all of these, let's do one more poll. So people, please pull out your poll hats. We're going to be talking about AI as a way to address these things. So before we do, I'm curious, where is your organization, right, in applying AI technology to optimize that lead engagement process? You're not interested, you're looking at it, you're actually using it, but for simple things like scoring leads, you're doing it for more sophisticated things like really helping the salespeople, or you've got fully autonomous AI, you've got the Borg out there doing the work for you. Give people just another moment to finish. Okay, and then the responses are not surprising. So most people are I'm actually surprised to see someone who's not interested at all. That's fascinating in today's day and age. But most people are kind of looking at it but not doing a lot, or they're dipping their finger into things like scoring leads. Very helpful. Okay, good. And those are all important things to do, and nothing we're going to talk about today says that those are not important, but they're not enough is what we're going to suggest. Let's take a look. So organizations today, they need to be able, again, to address the first half that Terry was talking about, the black holes, the slow response, the low effort. Basically, even if you've built SLAs with your sales team, they often become breakpoints in the handoff. So I think most people kind of know that this is an issue, but we wanted to actually quantify it and see, is it really an issue? And if it is, how much of an issue is it? So we commissioned researchers at several universities to actually reach out to almost 1,000 companies and raise their hands and say, you know what, I am your hottest sales lead. If they had a web form, they filled it out. If they had a sales email address, they did that. And they reached out and said, I want to talk to a salesperson there. And they did it multiple times to give them a chance, and they did it just there were no tricks. And what's interesting, I think we all know that, well, the results might be kind of disappointing, but it was fascinating to see. First thing, this first half of it is they actually also did a poll with these same companies, and they said, similar to what we just asked you a moment ago, but earlier in the day, how good do you think you are at following up on your leads? And interestingly, 75% of the companies that responded said they think they are very good at following up on their leads. So we thought, maybe this isn't going to go the way we thought. But then they did the actual testing and saw what happened. And of almost 1,000 companies who were reached out to by hand raisers who really wanted to talk to them, who made it clear, almost 4 out of 10 of those companies did not respond at all. nothing. To the hottest of prospects, whatever it took to get that lead in the door, they were ignored in 4 out of 10 times. But even of the 6 out of 10 who did respond, 2/3 of them gave up after 1 or 2 attempts. And if you were all in the room, I'd ask you to raise your hand. I'd say, who here is really going to respond to a sales inquiry after 1 or 2 attempts? And the answer, nobody raises their hand. So again, as Terry was talking about, slow response, low effort, these wind up being black holes, despite no matter what your SLA is. Perhaps the most fascinating thing is we've done this multiple years in a row, and we've observed that companies that are really good at it 1 year are not good at it another year. So even if it's easy to be good at this, it's apparently almost impossible to be good at it consistently. Again, SLAs notwithstanding. So while we did this research, we actually identified there are 4 key factors if you want to make sure that you're not succumbing to the black holes and the slow response and the low effort. 4 keys to being excellent at following up on leads and maximizing your opportunities. And we called these the 4 Ps. And the first one of those is, as you just got a peek, is promptness, right? You need to be prompt. If you want to be first, you've got to be fast. And depending on your industry, what promptness means can vary, but almost any industry a company needs to be better at it than they are. Many, it's within minutes. Almost certainly anyone's, it's within hours. Otherwise, people will be on to other opportunities and they forget why they inquired. And interestingly, as you can see here, the likelihood of conversion drops hugely after just a few minutes. So it's worth being prompt and figuring out how to do that. Second P is persistence. It's not enough to be prompt. If you give up after 1 or 2 tries, as we observed most companies do, even if they respond, that's also not going to do the job. Even if you try even 3 times instead of once, research shows you're going to double the likelihood of somebody actually engaging with you. And as you can see, companies are not doing well at this at all. Third one is personalization. This one isn't quite as intuitive. Companies tend to kind of blare out a lot of impersonal things. Fast is important, persistent is important, but people also need to feel that there's a person on the other end of this communication who actually cares about them and cares about what their interests are. And the research actually shows that you need at least 4 personalization elements in there, like the person's name, an indication of why they contacted you, etc. And actually companies are getting better at this, which was nice to see. And we believe this is largely due to more sophisticated automation, which is great. And the final P, we actually couldn't think of a P that means make sure that your emails and communications are getting to the recipient, like through spam filters, etc. If anyone wants to suggest an awesome one, that's great. We called it performance because it's a P. The fact is 50% of business emails in general end up in spam. I think we all can understand that and know that. So if it doesn't matter if you're fast or personal or persistent, if your emails are getting lost from the only perspective that matters, the recipient, you never responded. And so that's obviously it's worthless. Companies are doing fairly well. A lot of Bs here, but the number is going down. We noticed that if you're not doing a lot of personalization, the likelihood of getting caught in a spam trap goes way up. So that's worth considering. So what to do? So interestingly, again, going back to the demand unit waterfall, Terry's suggestions, right, about how to make sure that you're addressing black holes, slow response, low effort, and more importantly, the modern requirement that you address demand units, not just people, is super sage advice. But if you think about it, now instead of having to engage 1 person in an organization, now you have to engage, in his example, 10 people in the organization. So it dramatically increases your likelihood of success, but it also dramatically exacerbates the challenge of doing it well. And realistically, there's only one way to do it well, and there's 2 ways. You could hire 1 million people and put them in a room, but that's not very cost effective, or you can allow artificial intelligence to do the job. And if you think about it, salespeople who are trying to reach out, they're doing their best, logically are not going to be able to fulfill the 4 Ps across those 10 times as many people effectively, because the curve, you can see it here, is right? So if they reach out 1 time, 2 times, you can see across the bottom there, the likelihood of engaging the person and having success is still very high. But after 3, 4, certainly out after 7, 8, 10, the likelihood drops dramatically. And so the salesperson naturally is inclined to go towards the next lead that it is more likely to succeed. And so the problem is, if you want to reach all 10 of those people in the demand unit, you need something that's going to get through the clutter and make sure it happens. And that's where AI can be applied at whatever scale is necessary in order to engage every one of those 10 rather than one, without letting them fall into black holes, slow responses, low efforts, getting poor scores on the 4 Ps. The way we do that is we use our artificial intelligence, and she is presented as your human sales assistant. So she is going to then reach out on behalf of your salespeople to every single one of those prospects in your demand units, every single one of them, and engage them in a human conversation. Truthfully, for those people, they honestly feel like they're just interacting with a nice, friendly human, not trying to sell them, just trying to help them get what they need, and from your perspective, get them through that first half of the waterfall so that they can feed your salespeople. So she's like a human. She reads, she understands, she writes emails, has nice, simple conversations. People engage because she's trying to help them. But unlike a human, she's infinitely scalable. And so she can do what is necessary to get all of those people engaged, not just the one that the salesperson's focusing on. She'll do this 24/7, never has a bad day, and prospects have a really good experience because she's just being nice and helpful. And so, to Terry's point, right, humans should be focusing on that latter part of the demand unit waterfall. They should be focusing on, how do I close deals? How do I qualify people? How do I build my pipeline? That's a good use of people. And leave the repetitive work, the other 9 kind of thing, to the AI. Let her do what she's really good at scale. And she loves the job, right? Most people wouldn't enjoy that part of the work anyway. Sounds simple, right? Well, I'm not going to walk you through this entire thing, but there's a tremendous amount of technology going on in the back. Actual natural language processing and natural language generation, and we could spend an entire webinar easily talking about this, but it manifests itself as a super simple but effective conversation on the right. She just reaches out. Would you like more information? The person says, oh, yeah, sure, I would. She gathers useful information like a phone number and introduces the salesperson and then hands it off to the salesperson to make sure that the work is done. And the salesperson now spends their day talking to those individuals who actually are interested in talking with a salesperson rather than going back and forth on this type of conversation. She even does one more thing. Afterwards, after a few days, she reaches out just to make sure that the two connected, like a good matchmaker would, make sure that the salesperson and the individual connected and the individual has everything they need. So that way you can make sure that your processes are working properly as well. And this is not a garage experiment. This is why we enjoy working with Terry and his team, because they see out in the field as well. There are thousands of companies using this today. Right? You can see major names like Epson and CenturyLink and Talent. So the odds are actually really good. You, the listener, have probably interacted with one of these sales assistants and not even realized it because you just had a great experience and got what you needed. So it works, it works for everyone. So that's what we do here at Conversica. Happy to spend a little more time, or we'll have a slide in a minute where you can find out how you can get a demo of your own or learn more about the research. But just to conclude here, before we get there, I'd like to hand this back to Terry, who's going to walk us through just a summary of what we've covered. Don't go away, everyone, because we are going to talk about how to get some additional resources. And again, if you stay to the end, we will afterwards be doing a drawing for those Beats headphones, so you don't want to lose your opportunity there as well. Terry?
Yeah, and Gary told me I wasn't eligible for the Beats headphones, so oh well. I was bummed. So yeah, let's do a real quick summary of hopefully what you learned today and what we talked about, right? So as we see, there's a major value in shifting your focus from individual leads into opportunities and buying groups. But as we do that, there's challenges in scale. Right. And so we need to figure out a way to be able to manage the handoff and the engagement in a way that we make sure we're touching all these people and we're touching them effectively, we're touching them quickly, and we're touching them with context. And so, as Gary saw, we believe artificial intelligence is absolutely an approach that can help drive the engagement as we see the scale increases that are required as we shift our focus. So thanks everybody for joining the webinar. Hope you enjoyed it. And I think you can ask questions in the chat. And, we have some questions that have come in already. So Gary, you want to play moderator and bring up the questions?
Sure. I am happy to. And let's see. Yeah, in fact, Terry, the first one is for you. This is a really good question. The person asked, how do people go about defining demand units?
Yeah, so the demand unit, like I said, there's 3 key building blocks to it, and the first is buying groups, right? So, the best way to define and understand a buying group is there's a couple different sources of where you'll get that information, and probably the best one is sales, right? And have conversation with sales that says, as we're selling these different solutions, what we want to understand is the patterns of who are the buyers, what are the personas and the titles that are typically involved in that buying decision process. And product marketing probably also has pretty good insight of that. They're driving, kind of persona work. And so the combination between product marketing and sales will help you triangulate to say, of the personas that we're tracking in an account, these are the ones that are associated with the solution, and that forms the buying group. And then, we want to understand, obviously, the primary need at the functional level to say what's the need this buying group is coming together to solve, and map our solution. And once I have those 3 elements, then I've got the building blocks for the demand unit, and it really becomes sort of that pre-opportunity that ultimately turns into the opportunity.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Okay. Let's see. Next question's for me. So someone asked, is Conversica an alternative to lead scoring, i.e., does it utilize a lead scoring mechanism in lieu of the marketing automation's lead scoring? Because the person says, one issue I often find is that account scoring can be difficult to implement given marketing's focus on individual leads and that every lead is important when in reality they are not. So the answer is many of our customers use Conversica alongside lead scoring. It's not a replacement for lead scoring necessarily, but the idea is where lead scoring is kind of an educated guess. You're using various factors to determine, we think this might be an important lead for the salesperson to follow up on, or we think this one might not be. Conversica allows you to do a couple of things. It allows you to, A, engage with every single one of them if that's what you choose to do. So you don't have to guess. Literally, the assistant will ask, and if the person's interested, then they will be passed on to sales. Or an alternate approach would be let the salespeople do what they're doing today, and that is kind of prioritize the handful, the one that they think that is the one that they should, maybe based on scoring, but let the assistant then reach out to the other 9 in the unit and make sure that they are thoroughly engaged as well, so you don't miss the opportunity to engage the entire unit. Let's see, next one is for you, Terry.
Oh, okay, cool.
How does the demand, if you don't mind, how does the demand unit approach change the SDR role?
Yeah, that's a great question. It does, absolutely, because they're sort of a critical role in this process, and they actually can be sort of the first approach or attempt to start to shift the focus from individuals to buying group and opportunities, even without doing a lot of the automation and the technology changes, right? So step number 1, for example, would be, instead of passing, let's take a step back real quickly. So if we think about a demand unit, it does 3 things. It's the buying group, it's the business needs solution, and it has stages. And a very common approach from the systems perspective for the way that organizations implement it is to extend the use of the opportunity entity and basically add some early stages, so it's considered a pre-op or a potential op, and then it gets vetted and turns into real op. So kind of step 1 for the SDR is, and we see this in a lot of our client base now, is the handoff that the SDR does to sales is actually a very early stage opportunity entity as opposed to a lead, right? So what that does then is that gives us a container that allows ultimately marketing, intel, and sales all to start informing and updating and progressing that opportunity. We're just adding some early stages that align to the stages in the demand unit waterfall. So, the SDR role, number one, could be the creator of the actual opportunity that you pass over to sales, and then sales qualifies and continues to progress. But then their behavior starts to change a little bit too, of identifying the other people in that buying group. So as part of their qualification criteria, just natural, logical questions of who else is involved in this buying decision process, and capturing that information, and most importantly, connecting it to that opportunity. So now, instead of passing an opportunity with just one contact associated with it, they may have identified, either through just asking a question of who's involved, they might find 3 or 4 other people, or kind of the other behavior we're seeing, which is very similar to the outbound SDR role we see a lot, is they're coming into their qualification approach thinking about the group to begin with, right? So Fred Smith might have been the person that was the most active person that came through and downloaded a lot of content. That might be our first connection, or that might be the first person we touch. But if we don't get a response from Fred, then the next logical kind of goal would be, let's start making outbound calls to the other people we believe are associated with that buying group. So, a couple different dimensions of it, but we think the SDR is a critical role that really does enable a lot of the concepts around this buying group. They're the one where we can start to collect that information and then systematize that information.
Makes sense. All right, I think let's move on. So, folks, there are a few more questions, as we mentioned at the start. Any questions that didn't get asked, we'll make sure didn't get answered, we'll make sure they get answered. Let's just walk through here really quickly. So, this has been a great webinar. First, thank you so much, Terry. We really appreciate you sharing your wisdom. Folks, stay on the line again for the drawing. Don't go away. Terry, thank you so much, though. Really helpful.
Absolutely.
We're going to have some more webinars coming up. Oh, yeah, of course. Excellent. We have some more webinars coming up about the 4 Ps. We're going to talk about persistence and depth on the 29th. Talk about personalization and performance on the 12th. If you want to learn more about Conversica and see it for yourself, real conversations happening, please look at the click there. You can see an actual demo. And if you want to see the research report, it's actually going to be sent to you as a result of your participating today. So I think that's it. Again, Terry, thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us. Thanks. Have a great day, everyone.